Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode on How We Build This Toronto, a webinar series featuring Toronto's most innovative leaders and the stories behind the movement they built. If you don't know me, I am Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density. And my co-host and dear friend is Lirad Kligman, the co-founder of the Yorkville team, a sales team in Toronto. And today I'm super excited. I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post, but I'm very, very excited to have our guest today. Lirad and I started this mastermind series to have a chance to ask the questions we always wanted to ask, but never had the chance to do so. Not in school, not in companies we work for, and that's why COVID gave us the opportunity to have these very unique conversations and have you guys online tuning in. So Lirad, why won't you introduce our guest today?
Absolutely, thank you, Nama. So we're joined today by Eve Lewis, and I'll read a little bio about her. Active in the Toronto real estate and development industry for 4 decades, Eve is the founder and principal of Toronto condominium market research company Urbanation, Inc., and of Toronto-based residential condominium marketing experts MarketVision Real Estate Corporation. In addition to these 2 ventures, in 2011, Eve assumed ownership of Woodcliffe Landmark Properties, a real estate company focused on developing and managing heritage properties in the Rosedale, Summerhill, and St. Lawrence neighborhoods. More recently, in the King West neighborhood, Eve has undertaken the redevelopment of the former Waterworks building, one of Toronto's most iconic historic properties. Once completed, it'll be a contemporary mixed-use building with a sensitively restored heritage component and a 60,000 square foot YMCA, 290 residential condominiums, and European food hall with 6 smart casual restaurants. Eve is fully committed to the enhancement and preservation of architectural landmarks that reflect the rich heritage of Toronto and its local community. So Eve, once again, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to have you here. You've built several successful businesses and you've done so many different things. Let's take it back to the early days. So how did you develop your thesis for your first business? And further to that, how do you look beyond the box to see opportunities that perhaps others have missed?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. So I ended up doing a master's in planning at U of T. I'd always thought that I'd probably go into law, and I decided to take a year off, and I went to Africa, and I ended up taking courses in planning at the university there and came back to U of T. And I did my thesis after, it's a 2-year program, and most of the courses were geared to municipal planning, and I really did not have that much interest in it. I was interested in, built form and spatial design and, density, and condos represented less than 1% of all the housing stock in 1981. Literally 15,000 condos had been built over the previous 20 years in total. And in fact, most of the time when I would be telling people that I'd be doing my thesis on condominiums, they didn't know what the word meant. They didn't have any idea. And when I would tell them that it was, an apartment that you would own, nobody understood it. Like it was not part of the nomenclature that people would understand. And so I wanted to do something different, and I wasn't interested in the public sector. And I probably wasn't interested in really working for anybody else either. So I did my thesis on condominiums. And just to give you an idea, at that time, with 15,000 condominiums, that represented less than 1% of the housing stock. Today, there's 365,000 condos, less than 40 years later, and it represents 17 to 18% of the housing stock. And quite honestly, nearly all new home sales are condominiums. Like housing used to be 50-50, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Now it's 90%. So how did I choose that window? Oh my goodness. I just wanted to do something that was different. I wanted to do something that was innovative. And I felt that condominiums would become a really significant part of the built form in a city. And I had no clue how much it would. I mean, they have totally transformed Toronto into one of the most really, it's an interesting city, and largely because we are the largest condo market in the world. So that's how it got started. A thesis for university. Never worked a day as a planner.
That's fantastic. So and so from the thesis, how did it then develop into a business? What was going through your mind? You clearly have a spirit.
I mean, I got my first job, and I actually ended up working right after grad school for Hunter Milbourne, who later became my business partner. And, you know, he hired me. It was at the beginning of, 1981. And by the fall of 1981, we were in a recession, and interest rates were over 20%. There was no market. Like, nobody was transacting anything. We were in a recession, and I went into Hunter's office and I said, "You can't afford me. Like, I got to figure out something," because he couldn't afford to employ me. And so that's how I started Urbanation. And I think it was just a bit of luck, and probably at that time a lot of courage, because what ended up happening is that the banks started requiring developers to have third-party reports, and they wanted substantiation. And that's how I started Urbanation, is that really the banks helped me, because they kept on, they were nervous about the condo market. They didn't really understand it that well. Developers were coming to try and get financing, and there we were. Urbanation had a subscription, and we would do market reports.
And I have a big question, but how did you build your business into the exceptional institution that it is today? What happened? Can you give us a recap of the last almost 40 years?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, with Urbanation, it really grew because, we were not just giving numbers, we were doing analytics, and we were then looking at trends and looking at market niches. And, I was determined for it to be best in class. And that wasn't that there wasn't competition. Of course, it was such a male-dominated world then. I mean, I don't remember being in a boardroom with another female for probably the first 10 years of my career. No developers were females. No advertising companies were owned by females. Not even marketing and sales. They were all men then too. Like, it was everybody. There was a few architects, not many, that were females, a couple of interior designers. And it was, I don't know, like, I just wanted to make a difference. And, Urbanation, I ended up doing a great publishing deal with a really good associate of mine, and he ended up taking over, doing the publishing. I still owned it, I still ran it, and that gave me the opportunity to go into, marketing and sales of condominiums. And in that way, I wasn't just writing a report for a developer to take to the bank. I was being able to be involved from the very beginning of a project, when it had its initial zoning, working with the suite designs, the amount of product, how large the suite should be, what the features should be, how it should be finished, working with architects, designers, developers, collaborating. And then literally you're there until the very end, after the building's built. So it was an amazing experience working on the marketing and sales of a project, because you looked at every single aspect of a condominium project. And I worked for all the great developers in town, and everybody was different. Everybody had a different approach, and I learned so much. I learned about what worked, what didn't work, and it's such a risky business. I mean, it's so capital intensive compared to most other businesses that, you need to have a lot of guts to be in it. And I got the opportunity to work for a long time, 25 years, with other people's money, really. I mean, watching them with their great successes, and some of them, they could have been more successful, and failures. I mean, I've been through 3 recessions and many market booms, and hardly anybody that's in the business has been around that long. So you have to work really hard. You have to find your market niche. It's been fun.
That's good. That's good. So Okay, so the phase when you went into and got the exposure into marketing and sales actually led to your second business. So can we talk about the second business? At what point did you start your second company? And to be honest, were you afraid you may spread yourself too thin?
Well, I mean, the second part of my business is I went in 85. So that literally was 4 years after I'd started Urbanation, because quite honestly, you know, it was all data and I wanted to learn and I wanted to grow and I wanted to learn many other aspects of the business. So I became partners with Hunter Milbourne, and, you know, we went through the huge boom in 87, you know, like that between 85 and 88, 89, that market went crazy. Condos became, everybody knew what a condo was by then. And then we went through the horrible recession. I mean, starting in 89, that recession lasted until 95, 96, 97. Like, really, it took that long for the market to get back to 1988 prices. And during that time, then I started MarketVision in the early 90s, which was my own company. And I think, you know, I had an associate that was, you know, Urbanation is very data oriented. It's got a system, it's got a place, and it didn't need me full time. And it's always had really great people that have worked with it and wanted to be involved in it, because quite honestly, if you understand all the data analytics and the research behind condominiums, there's really no better place to start in the business than there. So it's had a lot of great people working with me over time. And now I have a partner, Sean Hildebrand, and he's done a great job continuing to grow it.
They're both really great, highly reputable companies, and it's impressive that they have such lasting power in the business and remain market leaders, which is really says something to leadership. I want to go back to your experience as a female in the industry, and as a leader. You know, not just an employee, but as an entrepreneur, someone who's founded a business and has been sitting in all of these boardrooms with men. Just if you could talk about how your experience was as a female entrepreneur in the industry that's traditionally been so heavily male dominated.
You know, I think what was fortunate is I was the oldest of 6 children, and there were five girls and 1 boy. And I had a father that was, he didn't treat females any differently than men. I mean, from the time I was 14, I had to pay for anything that I wanted in life, because he believed that that was important for females to be self-sufficient, largely, I think, because he was worried that he might have to look after them. And I think I was a bit of a tomboy, so it was never, like, I don't know. I had a lot of male friends in high school. I had a lot of, so I wasn't intimidated walking into a boardroom, but quite honestly, I was asked quite a few times to get coffee for some, you know, senior developer. And I'd always sit there and say, what would you like in it? Like, it never bothered me. But I made it very clear that, you know, when you own your own company, it's different than if you're working for somebody as a female. And I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, everybody talks about how difficult it is for it to be a female in a man's world, but I didn't find it that difficult. I found it challenging. I found it, I wanted to make a difference. It didn't really make any difference if I was a female or a male, I think. I wanted to be best in class. I don't think that has anything to do with it. And I think by being a female, men in some ways were a lot more open to mentoring, or, you know, there wasn't as much of that competitiveness that you often see between males. And I was working for a whole bunch of different developers. So you worked with anybody else, you know, people's particular style. And I don't know, I looked at it as a challenge.
That's great. It's great that you have such a positive outlook on it. So let's move on. So you started 2 companies. They're both service providers. What was the transition like to go from Urbanation and MarketVision over to then being a developer? And do you think that your background with the first 2 businesses gave you sort of competitive advantage over other developers in the market?
I think the advantage that I had is, fortunately, Paul and I had been sharing an office for, over 20 years, because we had gotten together in the early 90s. And I think the big advantage is that, we knew each other's businesses intimately. He had been my client, and he had done a couple of condos in the early 90s when we were in a, horrific recession. His real love was heritage buildings and repurposing them and restoring them, into retail or office. Summerhill Liquor Store is probably a great example, or the Thieves at Summerhill, King Street, Market Street. And they're all heritage buildings that have been transformed. And I think because we met through business, I knew a lot of the risks that he was going through. I knew I had learned how to mitigate those risks. And then I had the great opportunity of working for, probably 50 developers over my career, 50 different development companies. And all of them have a different approach and a different way of doing it. And then, of course, you're working with different architects and designers and marketing companies. So, I was able to gain an inordinate amount of experience and exposure that I never, ever would have had if I hadn't had the background that I did when I transitioned into, becoming a developer, which, obviously that wasn't by choice. I mean, Paul died in 2011, and it was kind of, you're going to step in and take over it, and finish Market Street that had just started construction, and, a number of other projects. And then I kind of pivoted it and then started doing projects on my own. And Waterworks is the first project, not a small one, huge. And, we'll be completed it in another 8 months. It's been a great, 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 great project.
I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone in Toronto and how excited we are to see Waterworks come online. It's going to be a fantastic project. Been following it for many years.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So let's talk about success on all three fronts. What would you say is the key ingredient, and be as honest as possible? What is the secret to your success?
A lot of hard work. I think you have to work really hard to get where you want to in life. I think and I guess a little bit of courage and a little bit of guts and a little bit of fearlessness, because the market continues to change, and you have to continue to find niches in it. You have to keep on top of it, and it's a business that can be relentless in terms of you have to be on it all the time to make sure that you create something that is unique or innovative or unusual, or that you can get a premium for. I love to get a premium for things. I mean, I worked for 25 years, and that was my single greatest joy for a client, was to exceed their expectations in terms of the revenues that you could attribute for a project. And a lot of that's the market, but if you work really hard at it and you're very conscientious, you can always improve on whatever the market is.
That's a good answer. Any key wisdoms that you want to impart onto the next generation of real estate leaders?
Oh, just go for it. I think that when you're young, you don't have as many responsibilities, and you have the opportunity to take a risk. And you're not going to win all the time. Sometimes you're going to fail, but you're going to learn from those failures, and you're going to learn to set yourself apart and be it. But no, I say, follow your dreams, be best in class, go for it, work hard, take a risk, take a chance.
Really good lessons. Being best in class, it's actually the wisdom of the day for me. I think anything else you would like to share with the audience before we go to our last question we ask all our speakers?
No, I just think that it's, I think real estate and condominiums are, it's a really, really, there are not many businesses where there are so many moving parts. It's a puzzle. You're working with, 20 different consultants to create something that is hopefully very unique and is going to stand out on the skyline, and it's going to make a lot of people happy to be living there. I think the advantage that I have as a female is that, I look at design and have had so much experience designing that I look to the person that's actually living there. That, what are their desires going to be? What's going to make them really happy? What is going to make that a wonderful home? And condominiums have been, they've been an amazing career for me. And I love the heritage aspect, and it was wonderful to work with Paul and to continue his work at Woodcliffe in terms of, restoring heritage buildings. And I really love bringing the residential and the livability to a condo site. And condos have transformed Toronto. In the early 1980s, I was living downtown and I was working at the Eaton Centre and the office towers, and I would never pass anybody on the street when I'd be leaving at night from work. And now it's vibrant, and it's, restaurants are open at night, and it's just so great how much condominiums have transformed and made this city really very, very livable.
100%.
It's great to hear your passion and clearly see how you've been so successful and been so transformational in the industry. It's passion and drive, so it's wonderful. So we always ask our speakers to recommend a book that has influenced you in business. Do you have one that you can share? Well,
I think it influenced me more in terms of, I think the most influential book when I was young, and probably was instrumental in me wanting to go into the development business and into condos, was I read a book when I was a teenager, or, I think I was 17, called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And it is, it was a book about two architects, and one architect being, building exactly what everybody expected of him and nothing that interesting, and somebody that was transformational. And there's a very, very strong female character in the book. And I think it just inspired me to, I don't know. And the book was written in the 1940s. Like, it's really interesting, but it was about architecture, it was about design form, and it was about a very strong female. And I think that, I don't know, I looked at it and thought, I want to be like that.
There you go. The Fountain.
So not a usual business book, I would sit there and say, but it was the one that inspired me the most.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that brings us to our last question.